uh, let's start off the podcast to sort of like introduce ourselves. So my name is Tuan, CEO, co-founder of ScholarJet, and today we're hosting a podcast called Demystifying Tech Careers, and we have James Stone here with us, who's working at Hubspot. Please, James, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, name is James Stone. I'm a director of North American sales for HubSpot. Been at HubSpot now, celebrated my 9-year anniversary in February.
Wow.
So been there a long time, always within the sales organization. I've done a lot of interesting things amongst the sales organization, but now manager of a lot of remote employees, given everything going on.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so the goal of this is to have a conversation really talking about learning about your journey as to where you were, where you grew up, and how the whole path of your education journey that would lead you to where you are today, because I would deem you to be quite a successful person. And so we would want to take some of the learning to be able to share it with our audience, to learn and break down all the lingos as to sort of like how you thought about finding a career back all the way in high school, how you developed it during your college years,
Sure.
and what you're up to now. So let's talk about your high school journey. Let's start from there.
All right. Well, I grew up outside of Boston.
Okay.
Family is still in the house that I'd grown up in. I was from a smaller town west of Boston called Weston.
Okay.
Pretty, to be honest, it was an affluent neighborhood where a lot of parents were, lawyers, doctors. And to be blunt, sales was never even remotely, or tech sales, I should say, was never remotely on my radar. But grew up playing sports, was always competitive. And the interesting thing is, in high school, the only jobs I had were really working for myself. So that is sort of the first thing that I recognized is all in high school. I never really wanted to work for someone else. I thought to myself, let's go ahead and do something myself, try and generate the own cash in my pocket, by myself. And I actually, the summer between my junior and senior of high school, I launched like an eBay business.
Oh.
This was all the way back though in 2005. So did an email, had a few clients who moved into town, sold all of their furniture, paid a buddy of mine a few $100 to store the furniture in his parents' garage.
Okay.
And I made a nice pretty penny that summer.
So let's break this down for the audience.
Yeah.
So 1, what sport do you play? 2, and when you say that you want to work for yourself, like what sort of some of the steps that you took? Because back in 2005, right? It's like the internet access was, 5 years after the .com boom. So everyone was super skeptical. So how was that all like?
Yeah. So I grew up playing baseball.
Okay.
Baseball was my biggest sport. And I was also a golfer, also played basketball. So I had both the team sport, and then I also had sort of the individual playing against yourself.
Yep.
And I played all 3 of those in high school. And always when I think about that sort of like competitive nature, seeing your name on the top of a list, trying to go ahead and, with a team, it's like compete with people, but then also in golf, you're competing against yourself. So I've always been a very competitive kid, always been one to try and, like outwork the other guy. I'm not a tall guy in basketball, by no means. I'm 5'10", I had people that, could certainly jump higher, and run faster. But, I was a scrappy guy.
Going against all odds here.
Yeah. Trying. When thinking about like the job search back in high school and thinking about where tech was, the tech was in a much different spot. Like back when I was in high school and I started this eBay business where I was basically taking people's, luxury furniture and selling it online on like Craigslist, eBay, anything that they had that they weren't going to keep, rather than doing a yard sale. This was back when like eBay, the UI was like atrocious.
Okay.
It was like, trying to play, an old video game, where you had to sit there and just, type everything in. Uploading pictures took forever. But it did the job, it got a
Nice.
lot of bites, and it sort of fueled the entrepreneurial fire, so to speak.
Yeah, so very entrepreneurial, and entrepreneurs is someone who basically want to do things by themselves. And entrepreneur doesn't always take shape in form of starting a business. They basically are go-getters who want to do things their way, essentially. And so, how do you sort of like get these furniture? Like, you contact people, go door to door, and just like stockpile things up and in your house before you ship it out.
I mean, I went to like the public library and printed out like 100 flyers back in
Nice.
'05
Okay.
with with not even my cell phone. Like, this is actually, no, I remember it. I still had one of those old flip phones. It was one of the first ones that had video, on it, and I could take video on my phone.
Yep.
And I threw my cell phone on it, put it up in like the supermarket. Oh man, now I'm really showing my age. Put it up in the supermarket, like a couple of the local restaurants, up in the library,
That's the spirit.
anywhere. Yeah, I mean, anywhere where it was that, parents
Mm,
would find, perhaps the flyer. And you know what? I got calls, which was crazy.
nice. Wow.
Yeah.
That shows the determination and being gritty at such a young age. So from that, how do you transition into deciding where you want to go to college, what do you want to study, and how do you use some of that experience to aid in that process?
So I was looking at schools for baseball. That
Mm,
was my number one, reason for going to the colleges that I ultimately looked at. I did recruiting trips at a lot of the D3 schools in New England, NESCAC schools, did like camps around the United States, and my parents certainly put up with a lot.
mhm.
Ultimately, the decision came down to a few NESCAC schools, and I ultimately went with Tufts.
Can
Uh,
you clarify what NESCAC is?
yeah. New England Small Athletic Conference.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and what it was that really drew me to Tufts in particular was it was really the school that I looked at that was closest to a city, being
Hmm.
Boston. My dad had actually gone here undergrad, so he was always, I think, pushing Tufts. But it was also the largest school. I didn't want
Mm,
to go to a really small school. I went to a small high school. That was something everyone knew everything that anyone was doing, and I wanted the opportunity to go ahead and sort of have very much less boundaries, but at the
mhm.
same time, play for a great, baseball team.
Gotcha.
So that's ultimately what led me to Tufts for those variety of reasons. And when I got there, I'll be the first one to say I had no idea what I wanted to do.
No one
I
does.
think, yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the big issue is in college how they sort of force you into a particular role or a
Mhm,
particular path when I'm a perfect example of I had no idea what it is that I wanted to do.
mhm.
Um, and because of that, I ended up actually majoring in economics because it was a relatively general topic, but
Mhm.
just the notion of social science was something that interested me.
That was Elon
Always.
Musk has too. He had a degree in economics.
Yeah, but what really was something that drew to me was Tufts also had an entrepreneurial leadership program.
Mhm.
Um, not many liberal arts schools have something like that.
Yeah.
And I caught wind of it because my older brother actually was a senior at Tufts when I was a freshman.
Mm.
And he had taken part in a couple of the courses. And those were the first few things that, like, just organically I was interested in.
Mm.
Like, signing up for a macroeconomics class didn't really do anything for me, but
Yeah.
seeing, entrepreneurship 101, business planning, launch a business, like that got my juices flowing. Like that was something that once it was that I actually saw was what was required and what the course curriculum was all about,
Mm.
that's when I knew that, that was where I would be focusing a lot of my time. And so I ultimately minored in that and majored in econ.
So, what is your thoughts regarding the fact that almost every single person who attend college is taught that, well, from what my how I grew up was that you have to decide for a career, and then how that career, your major would correlate to what type of career that you would have. And this is the amount of money that you're going to be making if you go to this career. Like, how do you balance that mindset? And like, because people don't really know how to start businesses. And so my assumption is that because your mindset was in entrepreneurship, that ultimately allows you to have an awesome career down the road. And so how do you sort of like balance that, what everyone else is telling you to do versus literally doing what you wanted to do and basically taking the risk?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about that is it brings up a story actually after college. So during my time at college, I had held, some internships. I knew a lot of people in my network were big on sports. So I actually interned at the Fenway Sports Group, which was sponsorship sales. I interviewed at this place called Trinity One, which was a lot of sports management. Because I was always an athlete. Like, that stuff was always of interest to me. But the things that I didn't take into consideration upon all of these internships was actually how long it would take or how much experience you needed to get to the owner level, to get to the level that is partner. What's required of someone to get from the lowest member of the totem pole all the way to the top. And I started picking that up during the internships. And what was difficult was at college, you go to a career fair, it was all consultants, financial companies, engineering. There was no business. There's this large portion that is business that nobody goes ahead and will throw a flyer up or put a table out at a career fair. And so ultimately, when I was interviewing for jobs, I was one of the last ones to get one. You always envy the student that got the consulting role in September and they could coast all year. That was not my experience. But then again, I also didn't short arm myself. Like, it's really easy to get down on yourself and take a role right out of the gate that you might not like. And obviously right now the climate is much, much different than it was, back in 2010. But what it was that I chose to do is I took a role at an advertising agency doing account management. I convinced myself that it would allow me to figure out what it was that I ultimately did like. I interviewed, and I can go into a lot of sort of like interviewing tips, but ultimately I saw myself at this company learning. I saw the people that work there. I was similar to them. They had a good culture. Culture was very, very important. And to go back to your original question of sort of me versus what other people are saying, I quit that job after 5 months to join Hubspot. Now, every person told me not to quit. Every person, my parents, my professor from Tufts, you name it. But I made that decision, and it was the best decision of my life. And so I'll say that 5 months at this role got me to a point where I understood what it was that I really enjoyed, what it was about my job I really liked, what I disliked. And so to answer your original question, you don't know until you try. Like I know plenty of people now, having been at HubSpot for as long as I have been there, that have gone into finance or consulting, and they're chomping at the bit to get out of it. No bashing there, but it's just, you don't really know what you don't know till you try it.
So, I mean, this could be different for a lot of people, but like, what would make a job at a tech company a lot more attractive than someone who's working in finance, you think? Like, what is it about the day-to-day? What is it about the environment that is just, I guess, a lot more exciting for you?
I'd say the first thing, hands down, is cross-collaboration of the people you communicate with. In a historic, I'd say like consultant role or finance, you have a very vertical structure. You certainly have colleagues, you're interacting with those individuals. Many of them, I would argue, are sort of like the same rank that you are. You're collaborating with them, but you're always like going ahead and reporting to maybe the person above you. Within tech, if I'm like a salesperson, just as an example, like starting out, I was interacting with account executives. I was interacting with the VP of sales, the VP of marketing, someone within the finance organization, support. you have the opportunity to cross collaborate with so many different people. And to go back to like no day is the same, you don't speak to the same people every day, which is, I think, one of the coolest pieces. You get so many different perspectives because you have to understand that in order for a business to run, there are all of those different departments contributing to the end goal of growth. And having that visibility to all of it, I think, is one of the coolest pieces. Like any tech organization, when you think about it, someone maybe builds a product. That product needs to be marketed to someone, and then someone has to sell it. And then you have clients come on board and you need to service them. Every one of those roles plays a particular piece, but you can't be a good salesperson unless you understand how it is that you're marketing your product and what happens to the client afterwards, and interact with those people. So that was the first thing I had noticed getting to HubSpot.
So so in terms of an organization and a company, there's multiple different departments. There's the engineering department, marketing, the sales, customer success. Like, as someone who's graduating from college, who hasn't had an internship before, or are just about to get in the first internship, it's like, what is the moment where it clicked that this is how a company operates, right? Because everyone's telling you, get a degree, get a job. But then when you just sort of like are trying to get an interview for a position that you think you might be interested in, and you're in for a whole bunch of surprises, it's like you don't really know how every single thing works together. You just kind of come in and just listen to the things that you're tasked with and that your responsibilities to take care of it. So at what moment and what type of experience informed you that every single thing sort of like are connected, and that's how a tech company operates?
Yeah. I think it's the podcast, How I Built This. I think it's an NPR podcast. Have you ever heard of that one?
Was that all the way back? Like,
No. This is something like now that if I was back then, I would 100% listen to.
Okay.
And the reason why it is that I like that is because things like business acumen, thinking about, the question, how does a business make money? If you can understand that when thinking about any business, you start to sort of peel back the onion and recognize how many people play a role in it. Business was always something of interest to me, like even all the way back to my eBay business. I had to think about how to go ahead and market it, the flyers. I had to think about the sales when a client comes in. Client comes, I sell one of their items. How do I service that client afterwards? You build it, I think, through experience. And I know a lot of people have never gone ahead and maybe had an internship or been involved in a job. And I think back to when it is that I was out of college, like I took that account management role because I knew that I would be doing a lot of things that were in that job description within the business. But I also will say that it's sort of whatever job maybe you take, or as it is that you're searching, think about what your skills are. Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Do you enjoy numbers? Do you enjoy talking to people? You find really quickly, what sort of meshes with you. And I think a lot of people forget that when it is you're searching for jobs, and I certainly see this from really great entry-level applicants, they interview me, like, what is it about the role you enjoy? What happened to the last person that was in this role? Are they still there?
Yep.
Do you get along with your colleagues and go out with them? Like, I'm more of a social and extroverted person. Those questions were important to me. But I think to go back though to your original question, it's all about sort of what fuels you, what gets you excited, and trying to find roles that align to that. And so for me, I was always interested in how a business works, how a business makes money, all of those different pieces. So that's where my first job, I think I accomplished just that. I saw the whole funnel of the business that I joined.
So what I'm getting from this is, when you were starting the business in high school, you now know what it takes to actually run the entire organization and why every single employee is so important for the very pillars of the organization. So like, say you're trying to sell stuff on eBay. The question is, how do you get the word out? And so the word out could be in two funnel. It's either sales or marketing. And so then you start to build the sales and marketing team, which is I'm trying to draw a parallel on how HubSpot actually gets started.
Sure.
So it's built from the ground up, and then when it becomes so big at HubSpot right now, how do you sort of like connect the dots for a lot of people, right? Because you're getting entry level applicants. How do you explain to them like how every single thing work without being so overwhelmed? It's like, here's a book, you read it, do your homework.
Yeah. It's a good question. So when it is that we interview entry level people, one of those key attributes and characteristics we look for is sort of business acumen. That's one, but also,
what does that mean?
So business acumen, I would argue, is twofold. It's the ability to think about, when posed with like a particular business model, think about how is it maybe that business makes money, combined with, can you actually speak to someone that is on the other end of the phone about something that you're not maybe familiar with?
Yep.
So you could say it's holding a conversation, or you could also say it's speaking intelligently, about the business that more or less you might be speaking to.
Yeah.
But that's something that it is that I always ask about. In addition to sort of two things, I would say coachability, the ability to show past experiences of something that maybe you didn't do well, that you now do well now, today, combined with, I would say, true grit. Presented a problem or an experience where you were between a rock and a hard place, and seeing how you figured it out. How did you get out of that situation and end up succeeding? And I mentioned those types of things because as an entry-level applicant, I know you're not going to know a lot about HubSpot. You're not a salesperson yet. I know that you don't know a bunch about every, company that it is you're going to speak to. But I want someone who's willing to try, to fail again until they succeed, listen to what it is that we're coaching, and be able to adapt very quickly. And so, when it is that someone's like just applying to HubSpot as an example, or frankly, I think any tech company, being able to demonstrate that ability to pivot and to learn and be a sponge, I think is really, really important.
The true strength of humanity is our ability to adapt. So I guess that aspect is
something certainly we have to do at this point in time, right now. I think that truer words have not been spoken.
Yeah. So let's focus on sort of like your current role. You've been here for so long. Let's talk about it at the very beginning. How do you evolve from that entry level candidates to, I guess, let's focus on their day to day. Like, what is it exactly that you do at HubSpot? And like, let's talk about the mundane stuff, and then we can dive into the interesting stuff, right? Because for me, most of my time, I'm writing emails, I'm on calls talking to people. I'm like, from what I understand, if I have a good written and verbal communication skill, I am all set. Like I can use that and evolve from that, right? And so, back to you. What do you do every day, sort of like from that entry level point, and then now, how has that changed?
Yep. So I started out as what's called a business development rep. Companies will use BDR, business development rep, SDR, sales development rep. Basically the entry level salesperson role.
Yep.
And that's a role where you are, in lack of a better word, you're a person there to generate meetings for the sales team, generate meetings and opportunities for them to sell. So
what does that mean in layman's term? Like, okay.
A BDR cold calls, emails, and does any type of outreach imaginable. LinkedIn, calling, emailing, texting to potential good fits for the business.
Yep.
And so they are typically measured based off of activity, how many outreaches they do, and then also meetings that they book. How many of these quality meetings with net new people did they set up for then sales reps to take and hopefully try and sell to and close? So as a BDR for 5 months, I basically looked all around the United States for businesses that would be good fits for HubSpot. I'd find the right people at those businesses to reach out to, and my days would be filled with attempting to reach out to all of those people
Wow.
and then hopefully getting them on the phone where I could go ahead and speak to them and have a conversation about their business and pitch HubSpot and a meeting with a salesperson.
So let's give an example.
Sure.
Talk about one of your past qualifying leads and how you got them and what sort of things you talk about.
So good example. Back in the day, before it is that as HubSpot being big now, a lot of the companies that we're targeting, they're maybe in our system. Back then, that wasn't the case. So I went to the Boston Chamber of Commerce, the website. Yep. I saw a list of all of the businesses that were on it.
Yep.
I found a software company in Boston. I went to their LinkedIn page, looked on their website, saw that they had a sales team, saw that they had an individual at the company who managed marketing. And I went ahead, I took all of those people's names, the head of sales, the head of marketing, the CEO, put them into our system and called all three of them right then and there. Wow. Called all three, and I also emailed all three. And I also connected with them on LinkedIn on all three. Yep. And then I would set a task, because if I didn't reach them, set a task for maybe a few days out to try again. And then frankly, then it's like on to the next one. Then you found another company on the Chamber of Commerce list. But going back, like let's say I did have the opportunity to catch one of them on the phone. The goal is if you think about it, your goal is to show enough value to have a good enough conversation where they're open to having a meeting with your salesperson. So you have to be good at building rapport right away, not scaring them off.
So building rapport is basically trying to make a connection with the other person.
Exactly. And truthfully, that's all stemmed from doing your due diligence and your research before reaching out. There's a lot of things that you can take away from looking at like a company's website or a person's LinkedIn to go ahead and get an understanding of maybe what they're all about.
Social media stalking at its finest.
That's basically what it's all about.
Yes.
But then it's also looking like things on the website. Like you want to look at a company's blog, look at their job site to see what types of people they're hiring, trying to see what activity, because you can gain a lot of insight to see what the business's priorities are and where they're dedicating a lot of their dollars by who they're hiring or what events they're attending to get a good sense to have a great conversation. So for a software company, if I saw that they were attending 2 trade shows and they were exhibiting at it, it's the first thing I'm going to bring up to that marketer. Hey, I saw your page about exhibiting at a trade show. Wanted to go ahead and reach out because I'm curious. How well do those actually work out for you? Do you get a lot of interest in them? What is it that you usually see as the ROI of those shows? Granted, those questions when I was like 23 years old didn't come to me naturally. It'd sort of be like, hey, I see that you're a company ABC, and you manage the marketing team. How's it going? And just building a conversation. It's almost the analogy I use is when you're a BDR or a salesperson, there's a wall between you and the other person. I think this is the same of any relationship. You don't go ahead and start off that relationship like asking on the phone, how much money do you make? That wall is going to go way up and you're never going to talk to that person again.
Yeah.
But if you ask someone a really open-ended, nice entry-level question, like, how's your day going? How are things going at the business? Ultimately, that wall gets lower and lower and lower. And then you're able to have a much more in-depth conversation with someone.
Gotcha.
And so that was the goal of the BDR. Get the wall down to here so that it is you could go ahead and ask them, hey, given what we talked about, would you be interested in speaking, with a salesperson here?
You're really describing the type of person who would be a perfect fit for the role when they're like a go-getter, potentially extrovert, but could also be an introverted person.
Totally.
But one of the things that I'm kind of curious about is like, obviously you're going to run into calls that are like, screw you, I don't want to talk to you. It's like, so how do you one of the biggest thing and most valuable aspect of being an entry-level salesperson, and what I think is the rejections, because the rejections, 2 things. One is that you get to learn from the why you're getting rejected, and 2 is that you get to build the resiliency of bouncing right back up from that rejection and try again. So let's talk about how you've sort of like first experienced that. What are some weeks where you're like, oh crap, I don't even have any more confidence in myself to even try? And what's like your thoughts and how do you try to manage all that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. There are days as a BDR, day like 3, day 4, you just don't have a meeting. You don't even connect with anyone. And yeah, you get down on yourself. You think to yourself, what am I doing wrong? Is it me? It's pretty natural. But to your point about resiliency and getting a lot of rejection, that all happens And I think as like a BDR, there's like a typical path where you come in, you're a go-getter, you're reaching out to everyone, and you're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of rejections, and you think about it. And to your point, you start to become really self-aware, and I think you then develop a really good sense of empathy. You start recognizing after a point in time, all right, I'm going to go ahead and message Tuan. Let me think about this. It's a startup. He's doing multiple roles. My gut is telling me he's not waiting at the bit for an email from me asking about whether or not he's interested in software.
Yeah.
So you start to develop this level of empathy where you start thinking, all right, what am I doing if I was in his shoes? What would be valuable? And a lot of those no's, screw off, start turning into, no, I'm just genuinely not interested in right now, or I'm still open to chatting, but it's just, to be honest, not something that we're looking at. So you develop this sense of empathy, but you got to go through the resiliency of getting told no a lot to then ask yourself that question, why am I getting all of these no's? Until you reach that point, you never fully understand that, once again, you're just speaking to a person on the other side of the phone.
So I'm curious, does that help you with your dating life at the beginning?
Oh my God. I don't know. There are a lot of comparisons made between sales and dating. There's still a lot of rejection. Yeah. No doubt in my mind. Oh, yeah. But one of the first lines I remember my manager would say to me, and this is a great line as well to a BDR, you're definitely not going to get married on the first date. Yeah. You can't go ahead and make a sale on your first phone call. You got to take them out first. I remember I think it was Dan Tyre, who was one of the first employees at HubSpot, said that to us. And it still rings true.
Really good advice. Really good advice. Cool. So thank you for describing all of the things that you're supposed to be doing in an entry-level position in sales. And basically, you're going out there, you are only competing with yourself at this point.
Yep.
And bouncing up in resiliency. And that has taken you from an entry-level person to now an executive at HubSpot. And so let's talk about how that transition goes and how do you sort of see, people need to have a direction on where they want to go in their career path. So how do you, based off of the foundation that you built in that skill, continue to climb higher? Yeah.
Well, I'll also add that not every BDR becomes a salesperson. I could tell you countless examples where someone comes in as a BDR and they move to support, or they move to marketing, or they move to customer success. I've even had a BDR who's now a product manager on our engineering team.
Wow. So why do you think that is? Yeah,
it's because the thing about sales that a lot of people fail to realize is you become a consultant. You try and understand the problems and the successes of a business on the other end of the line. Before you know it, you actually tend to grow this book of knowledge around how any type of business makes money. And where is it within the organization you enjoy the most? What is it about the customer life cycle that you really enjoy the most? People are, as BDRs, they're like, you know what? I really dislike the fact that I have to do all this activity, but I love speaking with clients. Boom, customer success. Or, man, I really think what we're selling is so cool and I'm talking about it. I want to go into product. You start, I think, from sales, you can really understand the intricacies of how a business works. And so for me, it was sales. I wanted to be a sales rep. I wanted to maintain that competitive nature. I wanted to keep moving up. And I just like that notion of exceeding a quota, hitting over 100% month over month. The accolades that came with it, the money that came with it, basically trying to beat myself over and over again. And I got to the point ultimately where I'd been doing that for a few years. I actually started a program in HubSpot that's not called HubSpot for Startups, that sort of itched that entrepreneurial nature. And I helped a lot of early stage companies gain access to HubSpot. And ultimately what it led me to is I was I've been selling for so long. I'd now really like to manage salespeople and manage a team of individuals. And there's a lot that went into that decision as well, but ultimately went into management for a few years where I'd been managing a team of, it was anywhere from about 8 to 12 people. And ultimately now I'm a director. So I'm now managing managers.
So what is the most challenging aspect of trying to manage people? So you went from reporting to someone and executing and focusing solely on the results that you create. And then now you have responsibilities below you. And then now I'm pretty sure you also have someone that you're need to report to. And so the dynamic has shifted. And so how do you transition into that? I mean, you went to management for a few years. Let's talk about some of the things that you enjoy and some of the things that were really annoying to you, but you overcome it and learn tons of lessons. I'm pretty sure.
The first lesson that hits you quickly is that not everybody does the job the same way that you do. And not everyone has the same motivation as you do. Like different things motivate different people. Yeah. And you don't recognize that, I think, as much until it is that you're co-responsible, for them hitting your number. As an example, as a salesperson, same thing goes if you manage any other team, is you don't truly ever know what's going on, on the other end. You don't know what's going on in Tuan's life until it is really that you're managing Tuan and helping him navigate his job. So one of the first things that happened, when I became a manager is I started understanding not everyone did it like how I did it. My way of doing it wasn't always the best way. And not everyone learns the same way. They learn differently and they succeed differently. They work different hours. They have families, different responsibilities. And you start to recognize, how does each person learn best? Or my role becomes, what do I do, or what can I do to put this person into a position to do their best work?
This sounds like being a teacher.
It is a little bit. You are a teacher, but at the same time, what's funny about sales is the student and the teacher are sort of like tied at the hip. So if the student doesn't work out, the teacher can just kick the student out of class and maybe get a new one. But you are a teacher. You're a coach. You're a teammate. A colleague. Like the best leaders I've seen at HubSpot, they lead by example. They won't have their team do anything that individual wouldn't do themselves, or wouldn't try at least to do themselves. Yeah. But they're a resource that creates a really great culture amongst the team, where they know that you can come to the manager with anything, you can approach teammates about things, but that no matter what, that person has your back, and they'll go ahead and support you, and they do whatever they can to remove those obstacles in your way from doing your best work.
So yeah, that's an interesting point. So you were able to create a culture where your team can easily go to you for anything. From what I understand from a lot of our audiences, like sometimes they're shy, sometimes they don't know what to say. And one of the things that I hate the most during college and in high school as well is that people think that there are dumb questions. And for me, my philosophy is there's no such thing as a dumb question. The dumbest question is not asking, right? And so how are you able to instill that confidence into your team so that they would be able to just come to you for things that they have questions about?
Sure. I think it's a couple of things. The first is, I think a really great manager, coach, or leader does a good job of setting expectations way up front, saying like, here's what it is like working with me. Here are my expectations for the team and what it is, that I'm expecting with you. Sort of like that verbal contract amongst your team of, here's how it is that I work best. And then in turn, you tell me, like one of the first discussions I had with every member before anything is, how do you like to be managed? What's worked well in the past? What did you dislike? And what you start to, that's sort of where that leads to like, okay, now I'm understanding how each person really likes to do their job and how they do their job the right way. So I think it's first, definitely setting that expectation right from the get-go. The second, I think it goes back to that point of people don't know what they don't know. If I'm having a conversation with you and I say no dumb questions, and you go ahead and you lay a question on me, do you know how many other people have asked that question before? Like, it's not stupid. Using crowd, sort of the team around you, and saying like, it's like, Tuan, you just asked me this question. I got that question a week ago. It's not a dumb question. This person on the team, which is true, asked it no more than a week ago, and now look at the position that he or she is in. So it's building the not singling someone out, but
Yeah.
allowing them to recognize that they're part of a team of individuals that are all looking for the same thing and have the same challenges that you do.
That's very interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
So where you are now, what are you looking to do next? I mean, what's your future goals? I mean, when people think about careers, and especially the next generation of talent in terms of millennials and Gen Z, we hear that they have, I guess, like 5 or 7 jobs for the next 10 years. They keep on jumping jobs from jobs to jobs. I'm just like, but you stay for 9 years. And so the question is, what is the benefit that you think, and how is it that you were able to stay for 9 years, and what's the disconnect you think is happening between the two generation? And I guess 2 is that, how would you advise, so like people who are going to tech, and what's the benefit of staying long term, and how would they consider future career goals? So right now, I mean, you're the top at Hubspot, one of the best. What's next? I mean, for a lot of people, they don't know what else is out there, right? And so it's almost the same place where you were now in high school, because you don't know what else is out there, right? So yeah.
All right, a couple good questions there. Maybe, I mean, which one would you like me to start out with? Because I think I can I can speak for a long time on both.
Let's go with the first one. Let's focus on. I missed that question too.
Yeah. Well, if I remember correctly, your first question was like, all right, now I'm at the director level. Well, you had like the what's next after.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I'm also trying to remember what the other one was.
Let's go with the now that you're a director, what's next? Oh, the other question is, what do you think is the gap between what you thought about versus the newer generation, when they're just basically jumping from jobs to jobs rather than committing for so long?
Got it. So I think there's a form of luck here. Like, and this isn't to toot HubSpot's horn. Like, I think that there are companies that come around that are very, very rare, that build great cultures, that instill a lot of confidence, and people stick around for a while. I happen to find that job that allowed me to recognize what I liked and disliked really early on in my career. And I took a risk and I quit to join here. I joined also the company at a time where, regarding your question, like, what was the benefit of like my time at HubSpot? What contributed to me staying here for so long? It's like, I started a company when it was very, very small relative to where we are, today. I had access to senior leaders. I had access and visibility to how decisions were made. And it allowed me to build this painting, so to speak, of like the framework of all of HubSpot, because I was able to see everything. At a larger company, you don't have that visibility as much. So I was very fortunate being very, very early on, because I sort of did have to wear a few different hats. I was part of a program that was relatively early on, like BDRs were relatively new. We were figuring it out as we went. So there's a huge value to that.
You use the term wearing different hats.
Yeah.
Right. Not a lot of people are familiar with that. What does that mean?
So people are hired for a certain thing. In my case, a business development rep was hired to go ahead and make calls, send emails, and book meetings.
Yep.
What they don't tell you, though, is this project, the BDR organization, was only in its second or third month of existence. So wearing a lot of different hats, we were building scripts. We were building what are now like huge film clubs. We were doing really cool things amongst, like, it's funny things, but that contributed to our culture. Building our golf tournament, our charity golf tournament that we do every single year. HubSpot hadn't had one prior to that. We had, monthly team outings that contributed to building the team culture that didn't happen before that. We incorporated a new compensation structure because of how it is that we were acting and how we were incentivized. Like, when I say we had to market the program ourselves, we helped build the job description. We helped work with marketing to build, the people that we reach out to that weren't interested, how do we market to them better? So you start finding yourself wearing different hats, not just selling. And granted, HubSpot was a little bit more formatted. We had lines drawn in the sand of different teams, but like if you're joining an earlier stage company, when I say wearing different hats, I usually equate it to you're doing a lot of different jobs, certainly the ones that you didn't maybe even think that you signed up for, but that are integral into the business functioning and operating the right way.
Yeah.
So going back to your question, like I had a lot of visibility and a lot of transparency amongst the executive team.
Yep.
It gave me a lot of visibility and understanding how all these things were working. And over time, they've maintained that visibility. They've maintained that transparency. I've had access to that senior leadership team when there were questions or things I didn't know about. I've had the opportunity to build and also to operate certain things within the company. And that I think is contributed to sort of me staying around, in addition to the culture of feeding into that level of autonomy that I've always appreciated, where, I think that HubSpot's done a great job of managing its employees while not micromanaging them. And it fosters a really, I think, competitive but creative culture where people are competing with one another rather than against.
Yeah, that's very important.
But yeah, that's like, I think that's certainly very much more old school to stay with a company for that long.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think I was fortunate in that I was in a position very much in school and right when I got out of school where I was still trying to navigate, and I was very self-aware of what it is that I did enjoy doing and didn't. I think a lot of people can become indifferent or content and say like, oh, nope, I need to stick this out. I need to stay in this role. I'd encourage you, take a step back and think, what is it maybe about the role you really like? The action, what is it physically you're doing during the day that you really enjoy? And then what is it maybe that you don't? And so, anyone that you speak to that's, been in the workforce for a good amount of time after that could probably help you navigate based off of those particular experiences you like and dislike to maybe point you in a different direction.
Very, very important. And yes, there is many different school of thoughts on that. So, I guess the next question is where to from now? From here, I guess.
Yeah. I to be frank, I'm very happy with where I'm at HubSpot. I'm learning a lot about the planning of building a sales organization, which is really, really interesting. Still getting my feet wet with managing managers, which it's its own business.
Oh man, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah, it's like Inception. But on the side, I've been getting involved a lot more in the Boston startup community. I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always been, I launched the HubSpot for Startups program because I saw there being a need for early stage companies helping with their marketing and sales. And so I want to get back into that a little bit. And I've been working with some early stage companies, speaking with a lot of early stage companies like yourself, trying to understand the challenges that they face. How can we help navigate them? Especially as it pertains to sales and marketing, since that's, what I've been doing now for 9+ years.
Yeah. Very, very experienced person here. So what is an advice that you would give to people who say are graduating out of school, trying to look for opportunities in tech? What is one thing to consider when trying to find a job at a tech company?
Man, I could go ahead and give a million pieces of advice, but I'd look at it this way. When you're looking at different types of tech companies, always go ahead and evaluate, is this a business that you can get behind? Does it make sense to you? Can you understand it? Do you see the value that it is there? Because if you're never fully bought into it, you're never going to give it 100%. And I think that's the first piece. The second is it goes back to my point about like interviewing the interviewer. Like you're going to, make a list of all of the businesses. Here's an example of in Boston. If I'm a person about to graduate, make a list of maybe all of the tech companies in Boston. Think about what it is then that they do, shorten that list a little bit. And I would go ahead and reach out, over LinkedIn, just ask for a cup of coffee. Like you said, you're not going to get married on the first date.
Yes.
Try and go ahead and get to know someone.
Yes.
Ask, what is it about the role that they really enjoy? And what is it about the business culture that they really, really like? Because once
Mm-hmm.
again, it goes back to interviewing them. You're going to go ahead and enjoy your job, not just because of the role that you're in, but also because of the people that you're going to be around.
Mm.
They're the ones that you're going to be around day in and day out. And it can make the difference between being happy and not. So I
Yep.
encourage you to ask a lot about the culture, ask a lot about their growth, their path to success, what they see that role doing. And lastly, I maybe, you know, I'm the old school mentality, be the last one in the office, you know, give it your
Mm.
all, get really, really, really good at something so that you're
Mm.
irreplaceable.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's no perfect example. Twan, you're the only person in a Boston quarantine that's sitting in GSV labs doing his job right now,
Please
man.
don't say that. Well, I guess that leads me to the last question is, during this time of uncertainty, what is one piece of advice that you would give for people who are out there um, thinking about, you know, ways that they could, I guess, take this? For me, I think this is an opportunity for people to educate themselves during the time where a lot of people are just spending time doing useless things. Like taking the time, like what do you think is the best thing for a lot of people under multiple different circumstances right now to prepare for when things do pick back up?
Yeah. So I wrote an email to my team with a couple pieces of advice recently.
Mm.
I said that, frankly, right now we are a page in a history book. You know, when you
Mm.
think about it,
Yeah.
whether or not this will be a page or, frankly, a chapter, we don't know. But it's rare that in someone's lifetime they have the opportunity to do self-reflection like we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about yourself, your process, that you might not be as happy about, or that you feel like is broken, or that you can improve?
Mm.
Now more than ever, you have an opportunity to improve upon it.
Yeah.
And it's also a lesson in just empathy. You don't know what other people at this point in time are going through. There are a lot of people that right now are, you know, at the brink and really, really struggling. I think it's also a good opportunity to not just improve on yourself, but connect a little bit and recognize that, you know, not everyone is in the same position that you are, and be like a true human, and try and help out and give back. So my message to my team was, you know, we're going to be a page in a history book. What are you going to write in it? And this is sort of a true point where you can define it.
That's very powerful. That's something that I can resonate with.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, James. Don't hang up after this. I just need to stop the recording, but
You got it, man.
really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And I think there's a lot of powerful lessons here. There's tons and tons of nuggets in our conversation, and help to distribute this and have our audience to learn from this. So thank you again.
Yeah, of course, my man. Anytime. Do you want me to still stick around? You stopped the recording yet?
I just need to